Okay, so good morning to you all. So am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So good morning to you. In the last class, we were discussing about the slope stability analysis of an infinite slope. So where we have discussed when the slope is or when the soil is under dry condition or under submerged condition. Okay, so there is another worst condition that can arise. So whenever you try to deal with any kind of a infinite slope or say finite slope, that is the steady state seepage condition, where the flow is continuously flowing. So especially through the soil depth of height h, the vertical height of, say I have taken here a small area, so which is designated as A, B, C and D. So A, B, C and D. Okay, just imagine. So in the previous class, we were discussing about the dry condition where gamma is nothing but gamma D or gamma bulk. But what will happen to the factor of safety if there is a steady seepage all along or in the direction which is against the counter reaction offered in the form of a shear strength. Suppose you just look at this infinite slope. So here these arrows are indicating the steady seepage occurrence all along the downward direction. So this h is the depth of the soil strata, the vertical height h. Now I have taken a small area A, B and C, A, B, C, D and D, so the same area. Now to the best way of representing the steady state flow is by simply drawing the flow net diagram. So where and equipotential lines, those are the orthogonal to the flow lines. So here I try to prepare some kind of the flow net diagram. So these all these small squares, so they indicate the flow net. So these are the inclined lines are the flow lines and the vertical lines are equipotential lines. Now one important thing that you need to understand, so when you try to deal with the steady state seepage condition as well as submerged condition is, in the submerged condition, the water is in a static condition. There is no movement of the water at all. It is like static existence of the groundwater table. On the other hand, when there is a steady seepage, water continuously flows. So when it is moving, it exerts something called as a seepage force. So that seepage force need to be calculated, then to be incorporated in the factor of safety equation. Then only we could able to realistically determine the factor of safety of that particular slope. Okay. Okay. So now, suppose that this is the flow net diagram. So before that, could you please tell us what is the equation for the factor of safety for the dry condition in the form of shear strength by the shear stress? That is C dash
Sir, gamma h
gamma h into
10
cos
5
square beta.
See, that's divided by, sir.
This divided by
No, sir.
gamma.
C dash divided by gamma h cos square beta 10 phi. Hey, cos square beta 10 beta. Yeah, the second term will be.
So it is right, sir. Sir, gamma h sin beta cos beta, sir, below.
Gamma h sin beta cos beta. Okay. Both are same. So both.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the slope angle. So this is the slope angle. However, if you look at this equation, so here the gamma represents either that of the bulk condition, dry condition or the bulk condition. Now we have also seen, suppose if you are taking the submerged condition, then this gamma is replaced with the gamma submerged. But how to change or how to incorporate the steady state seepage condition? So for that purpose, as we know, suppose if you take the effective stress condition, that is sigma dash is equals to sigma minus u. So total stress minus pore water pressure. So this is one of the simplest way of incorporating here. Now, as you know, suppose if you look at your what do you call the shear strength equation, tau is equals to C dash plus sigma dash tan pi dash. So this can be written as C dash plus sigma minus u into tan pi dash into tan pi dash. So this equation we can take as it is in the upside in the numerator. So try to incorporate gamma from the same calculation and u that you are going to obtain from here. So instead of this equation, now we will now replace this numerator with the C dash plus sigma minus u into tan pi. But we understood how to calculate the sigma. So that is NA divided by the area. NA divided by area. Now let us try to understand how to calculate the seepage force. Okay, for that purpose, so I have constructed a flow net diagram. So for a given area of A, B, C, D. Now, one important thing that you need to understand is, suppose if I put the manometer at any junction of this flow net and equipotential line, so the water rises to the topmost surface. Now here what I am taking is, so for worst condition, the maximum possibility is, so if I put the manometer either at this corner or at this corner, or you keep at any junction, so you will get the height of the water rise. Now this is the manometer I kept here. So this is the manometer. Now suppose if I kept the manometer here, so up to what level the water rises? Up to what level the water rises? Anybody? Would anybody able to give the answer?
Sir, that will be calculated, no, sir.
Oh, no, I'm just asking. That calculation we will do later. But I'm just asking. Suppose if I put my manometer, just recall your fundamentals of the UZ. If I put my manometer here, what would be the rise of water level in this manometer? Up to what level it rises?
Up to the level where seepage is taking place.
Up to the level where?
Up to the seepage is taking place.
So, but the seepage is, yeah. So, could you please identify where is that seepage happening? So, a simple understanding is, suppose if I put my manometer here, so the water rises until the interface of the atmospheric condition. So, how do you find out that one? From the junction of a D, if you draw an horizontal line, so until that level, from point C, the water rises. So that I have designated as L. L is the rise of water level in the manometer because of the steady seepage. Is it clear to everyone, or anybody has any question?
Sir, L is the seepage head here, right, sir?
No, the rise of water level. Yeah, you can say seepage head.
So where is the water table?
No, there is no water table here. There is a steady seepage condition. We are not taking the water table. That already we have discussed. That is static water table. But here it is a dynamic condition, steady seepage. So try to distinguish. Okay, static water table is different than the dynamic steady seepage condition. In the static water table, there is no movement of the water at all. While in the dynamic, yeah.
Sir, it is possible to have a dynamic seepage.
No, seepage itself is a dynamic condition there. Dynamic means it's not like an earthquake. It's a way of representation. That's it.
Means this is also dynamic, sir.
It's not a dynamic condition. I am saying ki just to distinguish water table with the flowing condition, I am just referring to it as, so if you take the water table where there is no movement, so we can designate this as a static water table. Okay. On the other hand, so if you see flow of water within the soil, that is typically represented under some condition called as a, or it is compared with the dynamic condition. But typically it is called as a steady state seepage. We forgot about the dynamic. It is the under steady state seepage. It's not a static water table. Okay, so when there is a steady state seepage, so suppose if I put the manometer here, the water rises so up to the atmospheric condition. So how to determine that atmospheric condition? All along the line AD. So if you draw wherever in a horizontal line, suppose say I want to determine the water level, say some arbitrary condition of A dash. Now draw a horizontal line here. So draw a horizontal line here. So this up to this level, the water rises in the manometer. But suppose that again you need to put your manometer here. Suppose if I put the manometer here, so this is the rise of the water level. So here water level rises up to this one. Suppose if I put the manometer here, the water rises up to this point. On the other hand, suppose if I put the manometer here, within this manometer, the water rises until D point. So we can interpolate in between. Okay. Now I can designate the height of water level, the rise of water as L. The rise of water as L. Now, in order to determine U need to determine, or you can directly represent in the form of it, your U as, so gamma W into L. Is all right? Gamma W into L only. But L, either it should be directly measured using the manometer, or suppose here I know the H. So can we able to determine L in terms of the H? Can you try to determine L in terms of the H? I don't know how many of you able to understand this logic. Yeah. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? Subhajit?
Sir, I'm a little confused actually.
Okay, where exactly is that concept?
Sir,
Yeah,
L is variable, na sir?
yeah.
L is depend upon flow line. So L is variable, na sir? It is not
No,
fixed.
see, for example, you can take, yeah, here I have taken the steady seepage through entire depth of the soil level. Suppose if you take half only, then in that case it is variable. But otherwise it is not variable.
Okay, sir.
It's not variable. Okay. See, for example, I have taken a small. Okay, let me tell you. I have taken a small container and it is filled with the water up to the top. Okay. Then I put the manometer at the bottom. So now please tell me up to what level water rises.
Up to
Where
water
it
table,
is,
sir.
Up to water table. Is it all right? This point is clear, na? Now the same analogy is valid here also. When there is a steady seepage, This entire soil is already filled with the water. Okay, however, it is in the flowing direction. It is in the flowing. And as Benazir Sultana said, suppose if maybe depending upon the velocity, or suppose if it is a fixed flow, then the L become constant. If there are no other constraints, the L is fixed. But suppose if we correlate, there is some kind of the overburden pressure on it, then the L may be higher than the atmospheric condition. So in that case, now for example, I will take the same case. So in this case, so when the water surface is directly exposed to the atmospheric condition, and if we put the manometer here, so the water level rises up to or equivalent to the water level surface. Now I will take the second condition. Okay, now this is initial water level, but I put some overburden weight, or I put some surcharge load. This is water, this is surcharge. Now in this case, up to what level the water rises? This is the water level, and this is surcharge weight, some dead weight. So up to what level the water rises?
Greater than the water table.
Greater than the water table. So here, say up to this point. Okay. So this is because of the self weight of the water as well as the additional surcharge weight W. Okay. So but we are not putting any kind of a surcharge weight. So there is therefore no possibility of the variability of the water level rise. It is constant. I hope this point clarifies.
So, but there is a velocity flow going on. So it should be here also greater than the soil. I mean, the layer of water, soil layer.
That is true, but inherently we are assuming that. So the flow is a under laminar condition. For example, if we take the open channel flow, yes, that's what I demonstrated here. So these are something like open channel flows. In open channel flow, depending upon the velocity, so the water level rises. More velocity, more rise. That is true. But within the soil, we are assuming the flow is under the laminar flow condition. It's not under turbulent condition. Okay, so as long as you are assuming the laminar condition, so there is absolutely no problem. But in this case, if you are not assuming the laminar flow and your Darcy's law is also not valid, Darcy's law is valid only for the laminar flow. Okay, so here okay, so here suppose if I put the manometer, the water level rises up to a height of L. So where the top surface is approximately, if you draw an horizontal line from point D up to that level, water rises. Now either I can measure directly L if I put the manometer, but so just imagine some practical situation where it is practically not possible to determine the L every time. So can we able to determine L in terms of the H? So for that purpose, you can draw some small triangle. So this is the vertical surface where the total height is capital H. Total height is capital H. Then I take some horizontal line here. You just imagine, so this one. Okay, so this is your surface. This is face. The slope of your infinite slope, and this is beta, and this is also beta. This is also beta, and height. This is nothing but your L. So this is your nothing but L. So you take some small triangles. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So you divide this into two triangles. Triangle 1, 2, 3 and triangle 1, 3, 4. So triangle 1, 2, 3, and you can determine, height h or height L. So try to derive everything in the form of L and H. So from these two triangles. So triangle 1, 2, 3 and triangle, so 1, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. So based on these two triangles, represent L in terms of the H and tell me the final answer.
Sir, how lower angle is beta? I didn't get that point, sir.
Surface only, na? Just recall over the previous. Recall that one.
Okay, okay, हाँ sir.
Anybody? First take triangle 1, 2, 3. So this will become H minus L. H minus L. Yeah, Vishal.
Sir, I'm doing, sir.
Okay, very good. Munir,
Yes, yes. Doing, sir.
yeah, it's quite simple, na?
H is equal to L into 1 plus tan square beta.
1 plus tan square beta.
L is equal to H by 1 plus tan square beta.
Okay. So it is equals to H by 1 plus tan square beta. Okay, this is correct. We can further simplify now. So this is H by 1 plus, so sine square beta divided by, so cos square beta. So this can be written as H into, so cos square beta divided by, so sine square beta plus cos square beta. So this can simply be written as H into cos square beta. Is it alright? So sine square theta plus cos square theta is 1. So we can write L is equals to H into cos square beta. So Mojit, is it alright? Benazira,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
is it correct? Your L is equal to H cos square beta. Is it true? Okay. Others? Savi, she is absent. Yeah, Pranavananda,
Yes, sir.
have you got the same answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So now, so this is seepage, this is simple seepage force. So this can be written as gamma W into H into cos square beta. Okay, now if I convert this into force, so capital U, so multiply with the area. So gamma W into H into cos square beta multiplied by area. That is the bottommost surface. So in the last class we have derived. So that can be written as, so gamma W into H into, so cos square beta divided by H by L by na. So L by cos beta. L by cos beta. So one unit will cancel out. So the seepage pressure can be written as gamma W L H into cos beta. So seepage pressure can be written as gamma W L H into cos beta. This is the final form. So now we know U component. U component. So substitute everything in the numerator. Now C dash is equals to sigma minus U, where sigma is gamma H into cos square beta minus gamma W into H into L into cos beta. So whole multiplied by tan pi divided by gamma H into sin beta cos beta. So can I rub it off?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the final that we got it. So now suppose if you write the factor of safety equation, Fs is equals to C dash plus this is sigma. Sigma means gamma H, so cos square beta minus U. So that is gamma W into H into, so cos beta. So this everything multiplied by tan pi. So divided by your gamma H sin beta cos beta. So sin beta cos beta. Well, you can complicate this equation by, so initially here I have assumed beta, this angle. Suppose if you take different angle, then you will get a different equation, but more accurate one. Okay, now your gamma will become gamma sat. In fact, this will become gamma sat. Gamma sat. In fact, here also L will come now. In this term also there should be some L.
Sir, L is getting cancelled out now. Gamma
Sir, we
L
have
is
to take,
Not in this equation, na. Not in this equation, na.
sir,
Yeah.
we have to take incline L, na, sir.
Inclined L only. That's why I have taken L by cos beta, na.
Yes, sir.
L by cos beta I have taken. Anyhow, so this is the equation, so this is how you can able to determine the factor of safety. So if there is a steady state seepage occurs, so all along the length of the infinite stream. Okay, so is this clear now? So you can rearrange the terms, so such that you will arrive at gamma sat minus gamma W or whatever.
But sir,
Yeah.
sir, here gamma, I mean sigma is gamma H cos square beta, sir, na. So this is a stress, sir, but you have put the gamma WHL, which is not a stress, it is a force, sir.
Okay. 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 So that's where. So either here you have to multiply with L, or here you have to remove the L.
Sir, remove the L because we don't.
No, just check
So
it. Check.
all units should be same, na sir. All units should be same, sir.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
C should be also multiplied with L, sir.
This also should be multiplied with the area.
So L should be cancelled out, sir.
Okay. Fine. Just check it. So suppose if you take everything in terms of either force or stress, then final form of the equation that you get factor of safety is equals to, so C dash plus gamma sat minus gamma W into, so cos square beta into tan pi or tan pi dash divided by, so gamma sat into H into sin beta and cos beta. Okay, so this is the final form of factor of safety equation that you obtain. Just take care of force and stress. Your C also need to be multiplied with the area. Okay, so this is how you can able to derive the equation for factor of safety determination of infinite slope subjected to steady state CPS condition. Okay, so I will take some tutorial on all these classes later.
What would be the equation for a C5 soil? You have only taken cohesive soil here.
No, this is C5 soil. No? C term is there, pi term is there.
So, but the factor of safety equation which you wrote above, I guess it is for a cohesive soil.
That you convert now. See, here we have taken the form of the equation of Fs is equals to tau pi by tau d. Okay, so try to recall the derivation of these two to the previous class.
So got it. Got it.
Well, since I told in the last class this one, so I have directly taken the equation. I'm sorry. Okay, now this is all about the infinite slope. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, you can go ahead. So we can go ahead to the finite slopes.
Sir, here you taken the area of means bottom area, sir. L by cos beta is bottom area, sir.
See,
Means it
when
is
we in realistic condition, we always take unit length of the soil. Okay, or in here, if I ask the unit length, that unit length is perpendicular to the board. Okay, so I know the inclined length of surface BC is L by cos beta, and you multiply with the unit length, that is 1 meter, but that is in the direction perpendicular to the board. So
but
your
sir,
L by cos
you sir put your hand, sir, there.
yes.
So, sir, this will be the our area. So seepage
Yes.
should be flow from bottom, na sir, because seepage is flowing through the cross section, sir. But you
Yeah.
taken seepage at the other side.
No. We have not taken it. Where other side? We have taken within this location only. Just imagine. So we have taken the location of the width. So that is surface BC and the unit length in the perpendicular direction. No. Just imagine. Just try to understand logically. Or else what you are talking is a point. Suppose if I take the point C alone, so then there is no area. It is a point. Okay, so here we have considered some finite width. Is it clear, Vishal? Or still you have any question?
Sir, I will try, sir.
See, what is the area here? Suppose if I ask length, let us come one by one. What is the length here?
So we consider unit 10, sir.
There is no unit length, length only. I have taken finite length, not unit length.
So if we have finite length, then why we call infinite slope, sir?
Infinite slope, you take the length, na? See, for example, this is a hill. See, this is a hill. So, do you know where the slope failure occurs and how much depth, how much length it occurs? Say, for example, from here to here. So, this is a 5 kilometers. 5 kilometers. So, do you climb on the each and every hill and keep on measuring what is the length of or what is the slope width of this each hill? Somewhere it is 100 meter, somewhere it is 100 meters, so somewhere it is 200 meters, somewhere it is, suppose if you go to Himalayas, it is hundreds of meters. Or if you look at the Borneo hill, it is couple of hundreds of meters. Okay, if you look at our Borneo hill, so the slope has some couple of hundreds of meters, na? So for each and every hill, we cannot simply go and measure the total sloping face length. That is practically impossible. So what we have done, we have taken a small finite width or finite length. So that we have designated as BC. Okay, but why this philosophy is not valid in case of the finite slopes? Because there, suppose you are constructing an embankment. So I must be knowing what is the height of this embankment. So this could be 5 meter, 6 meter, 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter. Okay, I know the height. So that's right. So I can able to exactly calculate or identify. So at least I'll be aware that whatever the slope failure happens, that happens over a definite width of height h only. Okay, not an indefinite length of L all along the sloping face of the hill. That's why it is called as infinite, and this is why this is called as a finite slope. Okay, now first of all, now you just ask me, what is further not clear to you?
What, sir?
Yeah, Vishal. So is this clear? I have considered a small length, that is BC. So it is calculated as L by cos beta, where width is the unit width. So that is 1 meter. So that is a constant. Okay.
Yes, sir.
This is one aspect only. And what about the third aspect? See, suppose say you have seen the Borneo hill. You are seeing only the sloping face, but how far it is extended, that sloping face? Is it again finite or infinite?
Infinite, sir.
Finite.
Infinite, sir.
It's not infinite, it's finite only, but we don't need to consider that width. So that's why we take always unit width. In one direction we take 1 meter, in the other direction we take some definite width. Okay, good. Any other question?
So for the same case, if we didn't have a steady seepage, then the only thing that might have changed is that gamma saturated will be replaced by gamma only, I guess.
Gamma submerged. Gamma sub, gamma sub.
Gamma sub.
Submerged. No flowing water, na.
So in the cohesive term also,
Cohesive term is not affected at all.
only then the friction term.
No. It's not like that.
So,
See, you just consider gamma h cos square beta. What is that?
so it's normal stress.
No. It is weight of the soil, which is causing the driving force.
So that's yeah,
Okay. What is gamma h sin beta cos beta?
shear stress.
Shear strength.
Shear stress.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So it is the resisting force offered in the form of a shear strength. Now just imagine when this slope is completely submerged. So what will happen to the weight component? So will it
The-
become gamma sat or gamma submerged?
Gamma submerged.
That's right. So under fully static water table condition, gamma will be replaced by the gamma sub on numerator and denominator side.
So but not non-denominator. I think it will be replaced.
Nice.
Sir, when it will be submerged condition, then it will be only saturated, not submerged, sir.
No. Saturated is different than the submerged condition. See, how do you define between gamma bulk and gamma dry? Gamma bulk means you are also considering the presence of the water within it. Gamma dry means no water. Okay, it's fully dry condition. Similarly, if it is below the water table, will you consider gamma sat or gamma submerged? Recall your consolidation theories or your permeability theories. Where did you use the gamma sat and where did you use the gamma submerged?
Sir, when a buoyant force is acting, then we use that gamma submerged. Under water table, if soil, then submerged.
Okay. So I am taking, say this is the natural ground. This is natural ground. And this is the water table at a depth Z. Okay. So this is the soil. You also know there is some kind of the capillarity. So this is some kind of the capillarity. This is capillary rise. So now you just tell me, where is the gamma sat and where is the gamma submerged?
Capillary gamma saturated and below the water table gamma submerged.
This is gamma submerged. This is gamma sat. And this one?
Bulk.
Either you take bulk or dry, depending upon the measured water content or depending upon your assessment. Okay. Now, why you are not representing the soil below the water table as gamma sat?
Sir, that upward buoyant force is acting.
Here, buoyant force, etc. Okay. If you understand that way, that's fine.
So we can also find gamma dash in the capillary zone.
Gamma
Gamma
dash.
dash.
No. How?
Sorry, sir, it is effective dash. Effective stress, sir.
Even in case of effective also no. See,
Even in
RS.
effective stress, it will be increased, sir.
Okay, let me ask
Pore
you
water
another
pressure
question.
also increase.
Okay, let me ask you another question. I will take three variety of soils. Soil on my one hand with only dry condition. Okay, see case 2, the soil added with the water. The third condition, the soil kept inside the water. The soil kept inside the water. So among these three cases, in which case you will feel more weight and which case you will feel less weight?
So least inside water and maximum when the water is on the soil.
Perfect. We try to correlate the same thing here. Okay. Still, anybody has any question in understanding about all these things? Nishad, any question? Pranab?
No, sir.
Ashwant? Okay. So can I rub it off everything? Okay, so this is all about the infinite slopes. So now let us consider the finite slopes. So we have some time. Say, so I can take, so this is a small finite slope. So this is natural ground. So this is a natural ground. So when you talk about the finite slopes, so finite slope, the basic assumption is, so the height of the slope is have a definite length. So that means I know what is the height of the slope. So it could be 5 meter, 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter, so on and so forth. So where height of the slope is known. But when you try to analyze the finite slopes, so we dominantly use two variety of methods. The first is mass method. So mass method. The second is slice method. So mass method and slice method. So initially, when the analysis was evolving, so that time, so most of the people has used the mass method, or the mass methods are the methods which are very early people started working on it or developing on it. Later, so all mass methods were replaced by the slicing methods, where so the slope means the advancement of the sophistication or the advancement of the computer technology, able to derive even complicated equations, are able to embed all these complicated equations in the form of a program. So for example, till 1 decade back, although Morgenstern and Price, they have proposed based on the method of slices, very complicated equations, but the manual calculation is so tough and so time consuming. So if you want to calculate one factor of safety value for a single slope, it used to take a couple of days. So that is the complexity of the equations. But with the advancement of the computer programs, even if you simply feed the entire equation as it is in the computer program, so it will try to calculate the factor of safety for so many number of trial circuits. So the biggest thing is that in case of the finite slope, suppose if I assume, so this is the failure plane. So this is the failure plane. So this failure plane comprises of some particular factor of safety value. Or this failure plane will give you some value of the factor of safety. But the question arises is it the least factor of safety value or the highest factor of safety value? Now, when you do any slope stability analysis, So we always look for the minimum possible factor of safety value. We never look for the higher value. So we have to always search for least possible factor of safety value. Corresponding to which failure plane, there is a possibility of the least factor of safety. Now suppose if you ask me, I can draw infinite number of failure planes. I can draw infinite number of failure planes. Now suppose if you are doing mathematical calculation by manual, so which slope will you consider? It is impossible to identify corresponding to which slope your factor of safety value is least. So this is where, so we try to take the advantage of computation program or the advancement of the computational programs, because so it does all the calculations in a fraction of seconds. So thereby, so it can able to calculate so maybe 1,000 or maybe 2,000, maybe 5,000 slip circles in couple of seconds, and it quietly gives us the least factor of safety possible corresponding to which failure plane. Okay, so having understood this, the complexity involved against which failure plane the least factor of safety occurs. So just try to understand the basics of, try to consider only one failure plane and try to understand how to derive the factor of safety equation. So that they have done is initially, since this is the failure plane, suppose if I consider the entire soil area as it is, suppose this is whole mass as it is, what would be the my factor of safety value? Or else, suppose if I divide this area into so many number of slices, will my factor of safety increase? The accuracy of the factor of safety increases or decreases? So they found that it increases. Why? When I consider the whole area as a single mass, I'm grossly ignoring the particle interaction. I'm grossly ignoring the particle interaction. How I can say that I'm ignoring the particle interaction? So just imagine, suppose this is the failure plane. Say this is the slope, this is the failure plane. Now, if I ask you a simple question, all along the length of the failure plane, will you be able to say yes, the failure is triggered at this point or at this point or at this point or at this point or at this point? I have given 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So will any one of you confidently able to say that the failure is triggered at 1, 2, 7 at any point? If yes, what is the logic? If no, what is the disadvantage? Any answer? We cannot say where the failure will be triggered. Okay, so that means it can happen at any point, so as designated from 1 to 7 here. Okay, so that's what is the disadvantage when you consider the mass method. So that is overcome. Suppose if I divide this into so many number of slices, I can able to interrelate what is the effect of this slice. Say for example, what is the effect of slice 1 on slice 2? So that is taken in terms of the tangential force or the interfacial force. What would be the combined effect of 1, 2 and 3 or 2 on 3? Suppose if 1 is accumulated on 2, 2 will be on 3, 3 will be on 4, 4 will be on 5, 6, so on and so forth. So that is the advantage of the method of the slices. So it considers the interaction effect of one slice over the other. Okay, and another thing, suppose if this is the entire soil mass, so if you look at the mass balance equation, so the soil on the right side, so this try to move in the downward direction. But if you look at the toe of the slope, so this try to move in the other direction, that is against the mass movement of the bigger soil. So this is what really happens. Suppose if I draw one vertical line, so from this line, the right side tries to move downward while left side tries to encounter the moment of the downward. So in the mass method equation, it won't consider any such effect, which is possible only when you divide the entire area into so many number of slices. So that's why, so if you have looked into the method of the slices, so you have seen some slices acting positive moment while other slices acting negative moment. So ultimately the combined effect is both positive as well as the negative. So this is the advantage of method of slices over the mass method. So the time is over. So this is simple funda about these two evolution of how mass methods has evolved and how the method of slices superseded the mass methods. So we'll discuss about all these things in the tomorrow's class.